Hey guys, welcome back to Fix It in Post. My name is Nick. Today we are going to look at some fundamentals of After Effects, which admittedly I wasn't actually taught, when I first started, but it was really confusing, and I thought I might go back and actually have a visit of some of these things for some people who are just sort of starting out in After Effects. And the main thing here we're going to talk about today is cameras. Yes, we're going to talk about the After Effects camera. And guys, this tutorial is brought to you by the awesome Lyric Video Creator Kit. It is probably the most requested thing that I get asked to make all the time, which is lyric videos. And unfortunately, due to my busy schedule, I don't really have a lot of time. So I thought I might create a kit that actually helps you, the person watching this video, to be able to make your own lyric videos. How cool is that? We even have a 30-minute masterclass to help you get started. So what are you waiting for? Grab your copy today and start making your own lyric videos. Just to explain it in really simple terms, there are two types of cameras in After Effects. So if we go in here and we have a look at what kind of cameras we create, we'll show you here. There are two types of cameras you can make in After Effects. One is called the one node camera, and I'll show you why that is. So when we create a one node camera, you only have basically one coordinate to change, and that is the position. So as you can see here, we have the, if we bring up all the properties of the one node camera here, you can kind of see it's just transform properties with a couple of rotation and orientation things in here. So just to quickly blitz through these different sections here. So we've got the position, which is just, as you would imagine, just changing the position of the camera up and down. Now the camera will always be pointing forward, unless of course you change the orientation of any of these sections. So you can obviously make it, if you can imagine the head of the camera can pan left and right. So that's the X. Up and down is the X is up and down, and the Y is left and right. And you can imagine the Z is just the spinny or the Dutch tilt look if you want to go for that look. Likewise, if you want to change the orientation, that also does the same thing. Orientation, obviously, if you just want to change it on its particular axis. So it just depends on what kind of situation you're at to kind of want to change those parameters as well. I'll just quickly blitz through the camera tools have you got up here. So we've got three camera tools up here. We've got the orbit around tool, the pan under cursor tool, and the Dolly Towards tool. Now you can actually cycle through those by pressing C. So as you see, I'm pressing C, and it just cycles through those tools. Now the first one here is just the pan behind tool. So if you just sort of drag it anywhere, it'll actually just make your camera kind of go a bit wonky. But if you hold down shift, it'll actually tilt in only one direction. So you can imagine the panning, as you can see here, the orientation is changing as well. So it just changes the orientation of your camera or the tilt. So holding down shift, I think, is a much more manageable way of using that. Now, obviously, if you want to go into the Z coordinate here, you have to actually go here and manually do that here. Alternatively, here you can also use these as well. These will actually constrain which direction you want to go, and likewise that as well. But you can hold down shift to do exactly the same thing. In my opinion, it's probably a bit easier. All right, now we've got the cursor tool here. So this is exactly what it sounds like. It's just a way for you to basically move the camera around. So if you want to move the camera more this way, it can do that, which is kind of cool. And likewise, up and down, and holding down shift obviously gets you those tools to kind of lock in one axis. And obviously here we've got another one called the pan camera point of interest. Now that's not really relevant to this particular camera as much as the two node camera, and we might come back to that later. And now finally we have the dolly tool. Now if you're familiar with cameras at all, dollying is basically going inwards and outwards, moving forwards and backwards. I would consider this going backwards and forwards also a dolly, but this is a particular dolly in the Z axis, or the Z axis for those Americans out there. We have three types. Cursor tool, which means that you're going towards, so wherever your cursor goes towards, it's actually going to head towards that object instead. So that can be a bit more intuitive for some people. That's kind of like the new method. I haven't actually used that much. This is kind of similar as well. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know what the discernible difference is between these two in terms of going towards a cursor and dollying away from a cursor. I haven't actually figured that out yet. And this, if you're used to the old After Effects camera, this is basically what it was before, effectively. So it's not. This is more just like it's like it's on rails. It doesn't matter where you click, it's just going to go forward. Alright, so let's start animating this one node camera. So we only need to keyframe one position to kind of go across. So let's pick the, we can just pick the coordinate, we can set a keyframe right here, and then at the other end, as you would expect, we just want it to dolly across. So we'll just dolly across this way. And it probably is going to do exactly what you think it's supposed to do. So here we go. And that's what you'd expect it to do. Just like as if the camera was on a tripod head that was locked off in one position, just looking straight ahead. And just for other reference, you can actually use the camera tool instead. So you can set a keyframe there and go there, and then go up to this little tool here, which is the panned under cursor tool, and just hold down shift and you can just drag it across as well, and that will do exactly the same thing. Right, that makes complete sense, right? So let's go to the second camera, which is the 2-node camera. And this one gets a little bit more confusing, especially if you've never used it before. So the first one's pretty self-explanatory, but the second one, not as much. So let's have a look at the second camera. I'm actually going to delete this camera just so that we get an idea. So let's create a new camera for this comp. And instead of picking the 1 node, let's pick a 2 node. All right. Now let's just reposition it so that we can actually see what we're looking at here. I'm actually going to pull it back a bit as well. I'm pressing C to roll through the different tools. I'm going to use the Dolly Towards cursor tool. I think any of them will work, but you can kind of use whatever you like to just kind of get the camera a bit further away. So we go down in here. All right, now with this camera though, we have 2 coordinates to work with. So let's have a look here. We've got the point of interest now and the position to look at. Now, let's do exactly what we did before, and we'll just set a keyframe on the first position, which is sort of just here. And already you can kind of see it's kind of doing some wacky things. You want it to be kind of in that direction, right? Let's actually even use this tool to actually pull it across. So let's hold down shift and pull it across. That's doing what we want to do right there. And now let's go over here and let's drag this across as well, like we did before, and it should do exactly the same thing, right? But watch what happens. What's happened to the first keyframe? It's not doing what you wanted to do. Now, why is that? That's a very odd thing to be doing. Now, we can go back here and try and fix it up. So obviously we can use the rotation tool here, the orbit around cursor tool, and we're like, okay, let's fix the orientation up. Let's fix it here. All right, that should fix it, right? And let's see if playback, it should go straight across. But now something else has happened. It's just not quite working the way we want it. Let's pull it back this way. All right, let's do this. But now it's sort of spinning on an axis. Now, that's because we have this new coordinate here called the point of interest. Now, what is happening here? Let's go to the top view and have a look. All right, so just so you can understand what's happening here, we have our 3 people here. So we have the girl at the front, which is this one here. You're gonna have to trust me on that one. This is the girl at the back, and this is the girl on the side. I'll actually go to a 2 view so you can kind of see. I know some of you guys like to see the 2 view sometimes. Let's go to this one and let's change this to the active camera so we can see what's going on. So if we go, I'll just go over here a bit further. Oh, let's make this a draft 3D so it's a bit easier to use. The draft 3D, man, amazing stuff. All right, let's actually get rid of these just so we can see what's going on. I'm just going to move this all around just so we can see all 3 of them. All right, now this first one here corresponds to this girl. This one at the back here is this girl. And this one here is that girl there. All right, so what is happening? We've got in the camera, as you can see here, this little nodule here. And we didn't have that before in the first camera. So I'll just show you in the 1 node camera, which we've got here. All right, if we're back in our 1 node camera view, you can kind of see here that in the top view, our camera here only has nothing. It only is the camera. There's nothing else here. There's no extra coordinate that's out here. So what's kind of neat about the 2 node camera is that you can actually pick where you want your camera to focus, and it'll automatically lock onto that particular thing. So in this case, the point of interest, which we've got here, and you can actually drag it around here, will actually lock onto whatever target you want and stay on that target. So let's, for example, let's pick the girl at the back here. Let's set a keyframe here, and let's also move the camera to the end and then set another keyframe there. We'll actually move it to the back, and we'll see what happens. And what you'll see what happens is that the point of interest is actually moved over there. Shouldn't be over there. But as you can see here, keeping the point of interest there means that the camera is sort of moving across, but as it's moving across, it's keeping its eye on that girl in the back. Like it's never moving off that person, right? And what's kind of cool is that you can actually change that point of interest. So if we set that point of interest there and then move it here and set the point of interest to move to this girl here, let's put a little bit of easing in between. You can actually see it'll actually switch its point of interest literally to that girl instead. And that's kind of cool because it means you can kind of automate some of the camera moves to kind of stay on a particular object. We can even move from this girl. Let's copy that keyframe across and then move it from there to this girl over here. So everybody kind of gets a turn to be the center of attention, so to speak. And there you go, as you're moving around. Now, some of you might not want that. I get that, but that's just sort of the 2-node camera in a nutshell. So how do you combat that if you are using a 2-node camera, but you do want to keep the point of interest as well? Because, you know, a 2-node camera can be useful in some circumstances. Okay, so there are some ways to combat that way of doing things, and I'll show you how to do that now. The first thing is to make sure that when you do set, we'll just reset this. So let's bring it back to the center here. All right, so say we just want to do a straight left to right. So what can we do? All right, so what we can do here is we can set 2 keyframes. So set a keyframe, point of interest, and also a position keyframe, and then we go to the end. And then we can just drag it across like we did. And what's good about this is that not only does it move the position, but it also moves the point of interest. So if you can imagine the top here, from the top view, what happens is that we are telling the camera that we want to move the point of interest across as the camera is moving across as well. So it's sort of keeping that same thing. So we're mimicking that particular way of doing things. But of course, if you want that flexibility where you actually do go, all right, I actually would like to focus on this particular person now. So let's say we choose from here, and then we want to just focus, and then we delete that last keyframe. Let's see where we are. So we just hit there. So what it'll do is it'll just sort of dolly across and keep it straight, and then it'll just then start spinning around. So you can kind of see there's some interesting ways to kind of use the point of interest to kind of create some interesting moves, right? Get what I'm saying? I know you do. I know you do. Anyway, that's just something interesting to kind of muck around with. And likewise, we can just sort of bring the focus back, move it around. So yeah, just keep an eye on the point of interest, because that's kind of the thing that kind of trip you up if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, and do some funky weird things, which I just did. All right, let's have a look at some other things too. So now, like every other camera, this thing is an actual camera, so it does have some real world properties to it. We'll just zoom in a bit here, just tilt it down just a touch so we can bring everything in. Let's see if I can get these two girls to line up behind each other. Yeah, there we go. So, ooh, it's a little bit weird, isn't it? I've got these auto orientating towards the camera, so it's sort of doing some weird things here. Let me actually turn off the audio orientation just because it's doing some weird stuff here. Auto orientation, and we'll go off. There you go. That's a bit better. Yeah, it was kind of doing some weird things. All right, so as you saw before, the girl is far back behind the girl in the front. And so what we can do here is we have some extra properties in here. We do have some camera options. If you press AA, it'll actually bring them all up. Otherwise, you can just twirl them down and then twirl down here to the camera options. So we've got a couple of things here. We've got a zoom, which is exactly what you think it would do. It's a zoom lens on the front of this camera, which you can use. Use it at your own discretion. It's a pretty fun tool. We also have depth of field. And as you can imagine, depth of field is exactly what you think it is. We turn it on. And as you can see, nothing happens because we've got the Draft 3D on, which it doesn't work in Draft 3D, but it does work when you turn it off. And so there you go, we've got depth of field here. And we've also got a focus distance, so obviously we can roll the focus backwards and forwards. Let's see if we can get it to focus on, oops. See if we can get it to focus. My update's not going very well. It's a heavy processing on my graphics card, so it's not it doesn't always like hang, you know. Anyway, there you go. So you can kind of see it focuses on the background. This aperture level is in pixels. I think, I don't know if there's a way to kind of control it like an f-stop. Let's have a look here. I've actually never looked at it. F-stop. Yeah, I don't think there's a way to actually control the f-stop in here. I'm just having a quick look here. I don't think there is. I would prefer it to be in f-stops, but it's not, yeah, it's not in f-stops. It's only in, I mean, I understand f-stops better than I understand what these numbers are. But anyway, this is effectively the higher the number of the aperture, the higher the basically the blurriness is between two things. So just like a regular camera, the lower the aperture, the less the blurriness between the foreground and the background objects are. So just keep that in mind. If you want to kind of keep it, so if you want it to be like more like an 85 at like 1.2, this is kind of that look. But alternatively, if you want to keep it more shallow and something like 3.2, you know, you want to dial that stuff down to something like that, which is kind of more realistic. Blur level is just, well, it's just exactly what it sounds like. You can just you can actually dial in your blur level if you want. That's not very realistic, but anyway, you can have the different types of bokeh that you like as well. You can go for the traditional heptagon or, you know, octagon for that kind of actual look. It does look different, but the higher the n-gons go, the slightly more processing you have to deal with. So a fast rectangle is, you know, good for most things, but you can tell the difference. Iris rotation has to deal with, like, you know, how many n-gons you got. So if we do get a particular kind of bokeh, you can actually rotate the let's see if I can actually get the bokeh to, I don't think you're gonna be able to see it that well, but you can actually rotate the iris to kind of get it to look like a particular kind of bokeh. I don't think I can get it because I'm not particularly, I'd never use that feature, to be honest. So, but there you go, that's what that is. Iris aspect ratio and all these things I don't really use, so I'm not going to explain them because I'm not very familiar with them, but they look like pretty self-explanatory things. I've just never delved into them or gone into that much depth with them. So that's it, basically, the camera in a nutshell, and it is definitely one of the things that can give you, once you understand the camera in After Effects, and kind of give you a lot more ways to kind of animate your things, and also help you ground your stuff in a realistic way. I mean, you want to be able to, and to be honest, guys, if you want to understand how to make stuff look good, it is actually worthwhile going out and filming stuff in the real world just to understand what actually makes something look good in the real world can be reflected here in After Effects to some degree, because a lot of these things are modeled off real world things. So they, you know, I believe that for the most part, things that are mimicked in the real world in After Effects can look a lot better if you know how to do it. Because one of the things that I always think is that it's kind of obvious when you can see the computer's just doing the work, right? But if you kind of understand what can be and can't be gotten away with in the real world, it looks better to humans who are watching this and go, all right, I get it. Like, that doesn't look digital, that looks handcrafted, right? And that's what you want to kind of get with your filmmaking, especially with your cameras. And once you understand the limitations or what your cameras are doing, then you can do some really fun stuff. I mean, look at this. Let's do a little bit of animation on this as well. Let's just set some nice animation on this. Everything looks a bit flat though. But it's kind of cool that you can kind of roll backwards and forwards. Oh yeah, this is a really cool thing. So if you want to set your focus point, so say the focus point here is also, you want to say, okay, I actually don't want to dial it in by hand. I actually want to be able to dial it in and go straight to that person there. So what we can do is we'll set a keyframe here so it stays on this girl first, and then we'll move on to that girl at the back. So what you can do is go highlight the camera and then highlight the person at the back there. Sorry, hold down Command or Alt, and then we'll right click and we'll go camera and then go set focus distance to layer, and that'll actually, as you can see, it just snapped there. It set a keyframe there. But look at this. This is kind of cool, right? So we're gonna go from this person to this person, and then we'll roll back to that person there. So the focus is all on that person. Anyway, guys, I hope that's made sense. You know, the camera is a really powerful tool, and it's kind of fun to use it for lots of different things. As you can see here, even adding that little bit of depth of field just kind of makes things pop out a little bit more. And when you add things in like lighting and shadows and some nice compositing, you've got yourself a really nice picture. So, and guys, if you didn't already know, I have an Instagram page with all these experiments, the little fun videos that I do during the week. I also run polls and a whole bunch of fun things as well. Great place to interact with you guys. Hope to see you there.